Hi Nimit, how are you? We're just going to wait for Diana to log in. What are you up to? Just okay. Let's find Diana. We're just waiting for her to log into the chat. Hi Kodar, good to see you guys again. Who's in today? Diana. Hi Sony. Diana, she's a therapist and she works extensively with childhood trauma related issues. And it's a very interesting subject that we have today. Hi, Forum. Hey, Diana, welcome to the chat. I'm going to just add you. There, we're just going to wait for her to reply. Hi, Siddharth. What's up, you guys? I hope everyone's looking forward to this chat. Hi.
Hi, Archana. How are you?
Are
Very
you
well,
feeling?
thank you.
Hi, Richa. What's up? Good to see you too.
Richa.
Sharanya. Hi, hey guys. Okay, so we have a minute, but I'm going to. Hi, Priyanshi. Give me a second. I'm going to just turn the network on. Hi, Ashu. Nice to see you. Okay, great. So, Diana, I'm going to do your introduction first.
Perfect.
So,
Go for it.
therapist who uses the trauma-based informed approach to help her clients heal, and she's also, more importantly, a very dear friend of mine, and I've known her for about 2 years now, and she's an absolute darling sweetheart, and
Takes
always
one to know one,
it
right?
takes no, and that's true, and always very helpful. So I'm very happy to have Diana on my chat. Welcome to Decoding Life with Anshul, and I'm so excited about this subject. Hi,
It's a
Aishu.
pleasure to be here. It's a pleasure to be here, Archana. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure, darling. My pleasure. I'm really looking forward to this chat. It's just about 4 o'clock, so I think we can even just we can pretty much just maybe hold on for a second. I'm getting a few
Yeah.
messages asking if we are online. Yes, we are online. Nili madam has shown up. Hi, Nils. How are you? Uh, okay, so I think we should begin. So, Diana, firstly, everyone says that everything that we are and that we become as an adult is essentially our first 7 years of conditioning, and it also begins from when we are in our mother's womb, and all our experiences that we have subconsciously
Correct.
in the first 7 years of our life is what
Yes.
defines as the kind of person that we are.
Yes.
Uh, so please tell us, what do you mean by childhood and childhood trauma? And let's explain the concept first, and then we'll get down to
Done.
figuring.
So first, let me just begin by saying that when I use the word trauma
Yeah.
is a relative term, yeah? So trauma could be, what could be traumatic for one child may not be as traumatic for another child, for example. But
Okay.
here we're solely speaking from the perspective of a child. So
Right.
children are generally, they tend to be more sensitive than we are, right?
Right.
So
Right.
trauma in essence refers to any event or situation
Yeah.
in which the child experiences overwhelming emotions, generally of a negative nature, that they are
Right.
not able to process because children don't have that ability at that age to
Right.
process. So, that I would say is trauma. Though the word trauma may indicate somewhere that it's way more serious than it tends to be. It doesn't need to be that. It could be anything that the child perceives as not being able to handle it, so to speak. So,
Okay.
that would be my
And what would
definition of
be the
it.
kind of things that you would say a child can't handle? Because when we're children, we anyway can't handle anything.
Correct.
So what would be an unusual circumstance, or what would be unusual situations that children
So,
can't handle?
I mean, discord in the house, parents fighting, it's a very common problem that a lot of my clients who come to me have a history of parents who don't get along. Of course, parents are well meaning, nobody harms their children on
Correct.
purpose. Most parents just don't understand that such a small child can be so deeply impacted by what is going on in the house, right?
Correct.
But
Correct.
children are very much in tune with their environment. They develop according to their environment. So
Right.
whatever happens in their surrounding
Right.
actually becomes part of their wiring in the brain. That's how they develop. So
Okay.
it's very, very important to bring out this awareness that children
Right.
are way more sensitive and way more understanding than we give them credit for. They may not have language, they may not have words to articulate it,
Right.
but they know. They know when something is good and they know when something is not. They're very intuitive.
Right. So, also, I know that a lot of work is done in this field and in this area abroad, whereas in India, the mindset is that children are resilient, बच्चे तो बड़े हो जाते हैं, and there are joint
Yeah,
families and people in family, and that much importance is not really, or not, maybe now it is, but maybe in the years, parenting has not been that important a subject, or not important. People just do what they think is right, and
correct.
there's no structure, there's no methodology to parenting, and I guess that's why a lot of people have a lot of issues also. Firstly,
Absolutely.
is that you think that parenting and the concept of parenting is changing? And do you think it's important for parents to be educated in the concept? I know when we were chatting and we were having an informal chat the other day at my place, and I know you said that, it's very important that people go through counseling when they're about to have a baby. And that was something so important that you mentioned. Please elaborate on that a little bit.
I think that, yeah, I think that this generation is far more aware because we have access to far more information. There's
Right,
much more material out there for people to refer to in the
right,
parenting process compared to our parents or generations before them that basically did it, I wouldn't say mindlessly, that's not the right word. They basically were on autopilot in
correct,
parenting. But I
correct.
think now with mental health awareness becoming big globally and people understanding the implications of early childhood trauma on basic development and development across the spectrum, be it
Right,
in personal relationships, in academic achievements, in job achievements, in life, basically, right? It is definitely becoming an area where I think it will build with awareness. It builds with awareness. And this generation has pretty much got it right compared to generations prior, for sure.
right,
But
right,
yes, it is definitely important that we keep talking about it, that people are still aware, especially when you are about to have a baby and you've
right,
never been to, it doesn't mean because you go for therapy doesn't mean that you are flawed in any way. We all have our own baggage from the past. So in
correct.
an effort to be a better parent, or I would say a more functional parent, it doesn't harm to just have an evaluation or go see a therapist and discuss your own past with them.
Correct, correct. Now, can you also explain that what kind of areas in our adult life, early adult life, does our childhood affect us? Is it only relationships? Does it also trickle down to careers? What are the different areas in which
Oh,
we get affected?
it's across the spectrum, Achal. It's across the spectrum. It's academic achievement. Your ability to focus, your ability to concentrate gets skewed with unresolved trauma, because trauma disrupts connection in a sense. Trauma also interrupts secure attachment. Secure attachment is something I'd like to touch upon. It's
Right,
basically the way you've attached to your primary caregivers, which is basically your parents, especially your mom. So if that attachment bond is not very secure, then the child doesn't feel safe to go out into the world and explore, right?
okay,
So immediately that is impacted. So the more anxious that attachment bond is, the more anxious the child is to go out into the world and to explore and seek things in the world. So I
because of
think, like, sorry, come again.
because of the security.
Yes, that secure attachment. The child needs to feel safe to function and explore in the world. If the
Right,
child doesn't feel inherently, and when I say safe, I'm not talking about your physical environment, I'm talking more of your psychological environment and how the child feels within themselves. So when that
yeah,
bond is not secure, then children, because they're so dependent on their parents, they internalize that deficit. They make it
right,
about themselves because parents can't be wrong, parents can't be
right,
flawed. Because children, as infants, we rely on our parents to keep us alive, right? Our
correct,
basic needs are met by parents. So when
correct,
that bond is not secure, we internalize it and say our parents can't be bad because they're keeping us alive. So there must
right,
be something inherently wrong with me. And what
right,
happens is this becomes a core belief from which we operate in all areas of our life, right?
correct,
It leads to lack of self-acceptance at a deeper level.
right,
So I think that's where the problem starts, and that's when we see issues. We see children with learning problems, learning disabilities. We see children with anxiety disorders. Some may even, in a severe case, may go on to developing mental health issues later in life.
Right.
And more often than not, this shows up in romantic relationships as adults.
Okay, okay. So I'm going to come to that, but I'm going to just quickly tell all our viewers that, guys, please hold on to your questions because Diana will take all of them. But let us get through with our chat, and we'll take all your questions towards the end of the chat. Now tell me, Diana, how does it shape? How does trauma in our childhood shape our adult life, and what are the implications that it really has?
So, like I just touched upon that in a sense, because trauma is, it disrupts secure attachment, hence it disrupts secure development. And like you touched on this point before, development begins at conception, not at birth. So
Right,
even when your mom is carrying you, your
right.
development will be affected. Your development in the womb is affected by her mental state, by her emotional state, by her physical environment, right?
Okay.
How she's feeling about life and about carrying you. So it begins at that point. But trauma, for the most part, um, like I said, people, you grow up with it and it
Yeah.
becomes your defect. It becomes
Right.
something that's wrong with you, and you're operating from a false core belief. And
Right.
then you're taking that belief into all your relationships and all areas of your life, right? So it does kind of hold you back. Of course, the intensity and severity differs from person to person, but it
Right. Right.
definitely has an impact in the long run.
Right. So I would like for you to elaborate a little bit more on this whole relationship angle and the kind of choices we make and our trauma and from our childhood. And it's very interesting that just about an hour ago, I was chatting with someone, and someone I've worked with very closely. She's been a part of my studio family, and she was just telling me that, and I met her after very long during this whole COVID phase, and
Right.
she's like, I lost my mom very early, and I'm aware of that. And I know she's had a little bit of an issues with her stepmom and her dad, but primarily her complaint is that my father doesn't love me. I have two older brothers, and I was a third, and because I was a girl, my father didn't really care for me, and after that, my mother kind of took some pills, and she passed away because she didn't want to conceive more. And she's like, to the extent that from the daughter from his second marriage, he's affectionate. To the daughters-in-law, he's affectionate. He particularly has a problem with her, and I was just telling her that it's probably something to do in your past and in your early childhood, or maybe the way you were conceived, or something that your parents went through at that time. So, and she says, I've just accepted that there's something wrong with me, and that is
Exactly.
so
Exactly.
so pertinent to our subject today, and that is so
Yeah.
on every level. So please tell
Absolutely.
me what kind of choices that we make because of what we do as children.
So in essence, when you have this unresolved dysfunction, so to speak, from your early childhood, and most people are not aware because we are not taught this in school. So how are we even supposed to know, right? When we grow up into adulthood, we are somewhere subconsciously attracted to people and partners who mirror traits and characteristics of the parent, generally the parent that we have unresolved issues with, generally,
Right,
right?
right,
And we kind of interpret it as chemistry. We say, oh my God, there's such great chemistry. It's a connection, it's instant, it's love at first sight. But somewhere subconsciously, you already know that that person has the ability to play out your parental relationship with you in
right,
adult form, but this
right,
time this time with the hope of a happy ending. Because with
right,
your parent, that need, or whatever fell short with your parent, that need couldn't be fulfilled by you as a child. So
right.
subconsciously we hope that this partner that we've chosen, and
Yeah,
then you see, you see the patterns playing out exactly like either your parents' marriage was with each other, or your relationship with one of the parents was. And if you're really aware, you can catch that and you can be, oh my God, this person is like my mom, or this person is like my dad,
right,
and you'll be shocked at how similar those traits and characteristics can be in your adult partner. But the hope is it's like a deep yearning for healing. Actually, that's why you choose. You're gravitated towards those kinds of people. It's
right,
like you're hoping and praying that this relationship will now end well, or it will end with my needs being met. So this
right.
is all quite subconscious, and it's not something you're doing sort of knowingly at a conscious level, but it's always good to be aware of how we pick our partners.
How do we end up, how do we even realize that we're doing this? How do we realize that there's a particular trait in your mother or your father, or like you said, the dysfunctional partnership that you had with one or the other.
Yeah.
How to understand this and then apply to our relationships? I like a lot of people who've had unhappy
I
childhoods
think,
are phobic in a way, not
right.
just looking for partners, but also commitment phobic.
Correct.
How does
So,
that pan out there?
so commitment phobia is generally a symptom of an insecure attachment in childhood. People who are
Okay.
generally securely attached will not be afraid of commitment because they know who they are. They're more sort of better self-concept, better self-esteem. But fear of commitment generally comes from an anxious or an avoidant sort of attachment with your caregiver. Yeah.
Right.
So, but like to answer your question, how you get aware, I mean, when you're in a dysfunctional relationship as an adult, or when you're not in a happy space, say in a marriage or in a romantic partnership, that is the only time you generally do the digging. You will
Right.
not go into that space if you're okay with the way things are. Because for a lot of people, dysfunction is normal. But
Right.
there is something in you that kind of pulls you towards trying to say, why is this happening to me? Or why am I not fully happy? Or what is missing in this relationship? And that's
Right.
your cue. That's your cue to dig deeper. That's your cue to sort of sit up and say, hey, let me just step back and understand this pattern. Where in the past has this pattern happened? Is it with a
Right.
parent? Is it with a sibling? Is this mirroring my childhood in any possible way? You sort of connect the dots if you are aware and open to it.
Right. Right. Wow, that was really taking me
To
also a
intense.
minute to
I think
complete thought.
we all can, we all can resonate. And this is what I keep saying is like, don't make therapy about being unwell, or don't make therapy about being crazy. Therapy is something we all need. It's like you'd go for a blood test every year. You'd go check your vitals and you check your parameters health physically, right? So why not do that mentally? It's so important. It sets the
Right.
stage for everything you're going to do in your life.
Right.
It's very, very important to do that.
Right. So, there was this whole, I'm just going to reference Friends over here. And, there was this
Yeah.
episode when it was like, oh my God, I'm turning into my mother, and this
Yes.
with daughters, mothers, because you're just trying to constantly not be that person, and you do end up being that person. And even boys, it's with fathers. Either you will really turn out to be like your father. They say the apple doesn't fall far from the tree,
True.
or then make you a completely different person because you've seen everything in your early childhood, and you don't want to be that person. So how
Correct.
is it? How does this pan out for certain people in this way and for certain people in this way?
So there's no one general formula for this, right? So most of it is again happening at a very subconscious level. So
Yeah.
if you are generally an aware person, or you're looking for some sort of answers for your own life, you will
Right.
somewhere come across repetitive patterns. And for example, if you have an anger fit and you may realize you're saying the same words your mom said to your dad when they were fighting in the
Right.
house. You remember?
Right.
Because we only create what we see in that
Right.
sense. Like we are wired, our brain is wired neurologically to recreate that familiar patterns, because the brain
Right.
loves the familiar. Anything that's unfamiliar is frightening for the brain, right? It's
Correct.
frightening for the nervous system. So we will generally end up creating and behaving in ways that are very similar to the environments that were modeled
We,
to us as children,
yeah.
right? But some people just become their parents automatically, and some people attract people who are like their parents. And like I said, there's no fixed formula for this. But
Right.
if you can sort of step back and just decode it a little bit,
Yeah.
and understand where this is coming from, it
Yeah.
definitely puts a lot of things in perspective. It gives you a lot of clarity. And
Right.
then from that vantage point, you can make an informed decision for your life, whichever way it is.
Right.
Whichever
And
way
there's
that.
also a very strong saying now that no matter what it is, that ultimately we look for in our partners what we've seen in our parents. So if it's a girl, then her father, and if it's a man, then his mother. Is that also true? Does that also apply? Are we constantly looking?
Not necessarily. In my experience and with my clients, what I've seen is the parent that impacted the child the most is generally the parent. Um, like for example, like in the case of your friend that you referenced, your friend was having issues with her dad. you know. So
Right.
in her case, I wouldn't be surprised if she found a man, or she's in a relationship with somebody who is quite like her father in many ways, you know.
Right.
So
Right.
or for example, I don't think, like, when a parent has hurt the child in whatever way, maybe unmeaningly, maybe meaningly, um, they generally tend to carry those wounds quite inherently, quite deeply. So you're again attracted to somebody who you can play this out with. You know, you play this out in a certain way, and then you're like, oh my God, this is my dad, or this is
Right.
exactly like my dad, or this person is making me feel like my father made me feel. For example, abandoned or dismissive or not wanted, you know, or neglectful. Some people have this wounding with the mother. So I think that the predominant pattern seems to be the parent that didn't meet the needs of the child. That is the
Okay.
parent we go out seeking in adult life from an ignorant space, from a space of not knowing or not being aware.
Right. Right. And how do you think? What about children who come from broken homes, from parents who are constantly staying in abroad? I know a lot of children go through a lot of they're constantly moving from one family to the other
Yeah.
because that how does how does that affect your relationships, and how do you possibly think we can break all these patterns and
I
maybe
mean, affects it massively, because, like I said, we wire ourselves according to our environment, and as we grow up, we repeat what we don't repair. So if we are
Right.
going out into the world, especially when you have children and you don't have that stability, that secure bond with whoever, generally it's the mother, because the mother is the one nursing you and taking care of your needs as infants. But it could be anybody in that regard. And
Right.
people who come from homes where there was a lot of fighting, a lot of discord, a lot of neglect, these are all manifestations of trauma. So if the child comes from that space, they just somewhere inherently they don't feel safe to function in the world, you know. So they
Right.
develop coping mechanisms. Again, they make it about themselves, they personalize it, they internalize it. So
Right.
something must be wrong with me. My mom doesn't love me. That means I am flawed.
Yeah.
There's a problem with me. And then you
Yeah.
go out into the world from that core belief, and you're creating around that core belief, which is frightening, which is actually, and they don't feel safe to function in the world. I mean, psychologically safe. They don't
And then
feel
you're
safe somewhere.
yeah, they're also attracting partners who are not making you feel safe and
Exactly,
secure.
exactly, because they're attracting from a space of not feeling enough or not feeling secure, right? And then they have all this unresolved stuff that they haven't dealt with to add to that mix.
Yeah.
So it can be quite a journey. I think
Which is willing to take a lot of uh, behavioral patterns from a partner that you shouldn't be accepting, things like narcissism.
absolutely.
So
Oh
I
my God. Yes, yes, and
right?
yes,
So
yes.
so tell us a little bit about that. What really happens in that space?
With narcissism in
Yeah, yeah,
particular. Wow.
yeah.
So that's one of my favorite topics, very close to my heart, very close to my life in many ways. So I can talk for hours about this topic. It's narcissism is well, there's narcissistic personality disorder and there's narcissism. Most of us have some element of narcissism in us, you know, like a feeling of being better than another person. But when this plays out in relationships, it can be extremely toxic, extremely unhealthy. These guys they come generally from families that have a lot of dysfunction in them. So
Right,
either too much attention or too much neglect. Either
right,
extreme can cause narcissism in a child, and they're very egocentric. They're very entitled. They believe that the world owes them, and they're very actually quite shallow and superficial. They can't really have that deep, meaningful um, connection with another person. The
very
only
interesting.
time they really bond with somebody is when they meet their narcissistic supply, because they need to be validated constantly. It's fuel for the soul for them. They
Right,
cannot survive without it. They don't
right.
like rejection. They don't like to be told that they're wrong. Um, Everything, and they gaslight, which means they dismiss your feelings, your reality. It's quite a hard, toxic place to be in. It's very, very difficult to maintain that relationship. It can really take a lot away from you. It can deplete you. So I'd strongly recommend that if somebody feels that these characteristics, if they resonate, if someone's in a relationship with someone who seems narcissistic, it would really help to talk to a therapist or to get some sort of help, because it's, you know, it's like a wheel. You can't get off it, and it's a very addictive space to be in. Most of these dysfunctional relationships are highly addictive, highly addictive. So people tend to keep going back because of the addiction, and the narcissist knows exactly how to keep you pinned in. You know, they're very manipulative. They're very manipulative emotionally. So they have their game plan on. So if you're not aware, again, this comes down to that. If you're not aware, you'll make it about you. And the prime targets for narcissists are generally empaths and people who play the rescuer role in relationships. Because narcissists just want, they can't really give consistently, they take consistently. So they need someone who has the ability to give consistently. So it's a heavy topic. And nowadays I see so many narcissistic relationships and narcissistic dysfunction, even within family systems, not just in romantic relationships. And they can really destroy and tear families apart. So I think, like, you know, just by talking about it and making it okay, because my clients who come to me who have a narcissistic relationship, they are shocked when I tell them these things, because they're like, it's always about you. Like, they're like, I thought I was crazy. I thought it was me. But then when you kind of break it up for them, they are shocked. They're like, oh my God, this is my husband, or this is my wife. And it's almost like this entire definition that I give to them was written for them, you know, for their story. So that's how deeply it resonates. And I'm glad you brought this up, because it's really, it's a tough topic to talk about for most people, you know.
Is it?
I think it is, because people tend, but when they are in this dysfunction and in this addictive relationship, yes, when they're in this dysfunction, what happens is they don't want to talk, because they believe they're flawed. They believe it's them. The narcissist has a very clever way of making you think you're crazy, and making you think it's all your fault. So a person who's in love and addicted, it's like an emotional addiction of sorts, doesn't really understand reality from manipulation, and they can't really see straight. And the longer you stay, sort of, the more it's like a spider's web, really. It just takes you, and it's tough to break away from that. It's tough, but it's the healthy thing to do. Now it depends on whether people want healthy versus addictive relationships, you know.
You said something very interesting, and I know that the part of the discussion we've been talking about how children are either lacking affection or coming from disturbed. There's also in today's day and age where children are actually having way too much given to them, being mollycoddled too much, being loved too much, being given too much money, lifestyle, etc., whatever. Do you think that also makes you dysfunctional in the future, or does that become like a safe, happy environment for you? Because then are you really able to cope in life with the difficulties that you're faced if this is how your childhood has been? Like, what is your take on it?
That's a very good question. I think it's about finding a sort of balance between the two. You know, so it's not about just handing over everything to your child because they ask for it, but it depends on what your value system is in your family, with your husband or with your partner or whatever. You know, it depends on how you're raising your child. At the same time, I don't believe denying your child everything it wants is a good thing either, because you're setting the stage for their level of deservability in the world, right? Their level of worth. What am I worth? Do I deserve what I actually want? You know, whether it's a house, a car, a business in the future. So you're setting that stage. So it needs to be sort of a fine balance between giving them what they want in moderation, and at the same time teaching them that it's not always going to be easy. There are some things you will get at the right time, you know, and sometimes it becomes like a barter. So for example, if they do well in school, you can give them something. Or if they change the bad habit, it's about associating, like a reward system, so to speak, you know.
Understood.
But I genuinely don't feel that with kids it's too much mollycoddling is healthy. It's not. It's about providing. Children function very well with discipline. They function very well with a structure, with a schedule. but they
Right.
also need love, and they need to feel like they are loved
Protect.
unconditionally. So
Right.
you can tell a child that you did something bad versus you are bad for doing this. You know, that little shift in how you speak to a child. So the child knows that it's not flawed, but perhaps
Yeah.
that this behavior is not the best way to go.
That I'm not flawed, but what I'm doing is,
Exactly. So
yeah.
you can, for example, you tell a child that, okay, I love you unconditionally, but this behavior was not
Yeah.
acceptable or not good. So the child doesn't feel like he's only loved if they put out good behavior. They know they are loved. So
Correct.
that psychological foundation is very strong, and it is so important for children to feel psychologically safe for them to function in the world at their optimum level.
Right.
And the safer they feel at home, the safer they feel to go out and explore.
And
That's generally how it works.
in your experience with working with so many people, do you believe that people who have had troubled childhoods, troubled past, traumatic childhoods, do you believe that they've been able to get over it and move on and have happy,
Yeah.
satisfying
I
relationships?
think it's a journey.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it's not like going to the doctor and getting a pill. It's far more intense. It does require a lot of patience, a lot of time, patience, energy, a lot of will to really pick yourself up and become the best version of yourself, so to speak. You know, because ultimately your brain is hardwired to your childhood. But
Right.
also, the brain has immense plasticity, which means that it can unlearn and relearn whatever you train it to learn. It's just a bit more difficult at this age. It's just a bit more difficult because you have to unlearn. As children, we don't need to unlearn. We just take in everything like a sponge. But as you get older, that unlearning process is what I think personally is a little bit more tough. But once
Right.
you're there, once you get that, and you realize that, okay, you know, you catch yourself, it's awareness, you're catching yourself in the moment of repeating a pattern, and then
Yeah.
you unlearn it. And
Yeah.
of course, bringing a therapist on board is always a good thing, because
Correct.
it just puts things in perspective for you. It just makes things very clear. It gives you sort of a new lease on life in so many ways.
Right. And do you think there's any age beyond which you feel like, oh, now it's hopeless and you can't break your childhood patterns and you know it's difficult to move on and have good relationships? Have you had that experience?
You know,
Where,
healing is one step forward, three steps back. And
right.
unfortunately, that is the trajectory. That is how it goes. It's never just about, okay, I've done a session with my therapist, now I need to be well. It doesn't work like that, sadly. So it's one step forward, three steps back. If that's your pace, then you're good. Then you're sorted, because you will fall. You will go back to old ways of behaving, old patterns of relationships, of behaving, of being in the world.
Right.
But with awareness, with mindfulness, with a good therapist on board, a good support system, that's so important. If sometimes we have people whose parents and families don't really understand what they're going through,
Right.
and don't really understand the concept of mental health and how important it is. So they tend to
Right.
dismiss it. Oh, go to a doctor, get a pill, forget about it, it's your past, you know, but they don't understand how deeply it has impacted the person. So in that
Right.
case, having a support system of friends, people who get you, people who understand you, you
True.
know, is so important, because it can really, it's like a new family, a family that actually understands your needs and
Yeah.
can hold space for your pain, you
Yeah.
know. And I think a lot of,
But
sorry,
I said, I know we've spoken about this a lot and
yes,
with our
yes.
friends as well. And, you know, it's so much easier to be able to, you know, if someone also
100%.
understands.
100%.
Yeah.
It's lack of judgment. You need a non-judgmental space and someone who you can trust to bring
Yeah.
your vulnerabilities out, right?
Yeah.
It's so
Yeah.
important. I mean, what else is it about? So you can't always go to your family to repair these things. Sometimes it's about friends, and it's about the
Correct.
support system, the family you create outside of your blood family, who get you, who understand you, and that is
Yeah.
such an important incremental part of the healing journey.
Correct.
It's very needed. Support, solid support.
And we're very blessed in that department. We have some of our friends here, and that's why we have each other. That's why I have you as well in my life. If a child is pampered a lot and he has the fear of FOMO, how to let this go? I
Fear
don't
of
know.
FOMO.
I'm
You know,
not
we
sure.
all have we all have a fear of, we all have FOMO. We all have it. Even as adults, I'm sure children have it more these days because of how much they're exposed to, you know. I think with FOMO, the best thing is to, FOMO almost comes from a place of kind of a little bit of insecurity, a little bit of not feeling sure of themselves. And
Right.
I don't know the age of this child, but depending on the age, children are not supposed to only be confident. They're supposed to have a little bit of insecurity, little bit
Wow.
of unsure. So
Right.
parents need to work a little bit delicately in that sense. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like
Right.
just sort of be a little bit more aware of what the child is feeling and kind of talk the child through that insecurity instead of saying, no, you can't be insecure, just be secure. It doesn't work like that. Sometimes it's important to let the child speak, let them
Right.
work through that process with them, you know, take it step by step, break it up for them, explain to them how perhaps they could be thinking the alternatives, you know.
Yeah.
And then just, that's how parents build confidence, by sort of mirroring back to the child what the child is feeling rather than dismissing.
Right, right. Very interesting. I have one more question for you, but I'm also going to, in the meantime, tell our viewers that the forum is now open for your questions. If any of you want to ask anything, it would be a great time. The Z Log, thank you very much. Our endeavor is always to bring in interesting discussions, and so that people can actually take home from there and
Absolutely.
help change your lives or whatever. I know you've covered for the most part about how to break this pattern, but if there's anything that if you think that I've left out, Dee, please feel free to go ahead and share. Uh, what is Nili saying? Aunt? This has been your best
Lily is
decoding
paying us
spot.
a nice compliment there. Hi, Zoo. My friend Zoo has joined as well. My sister's on as well. Let's just take the compliment. We don't know when the next one is coming. We'll just take it.
Exactly. Or the criticism.
No, this is actually a topic that we can go on and on about. It's so
Yeah.
interesting and it's so relevant today. You know, it's so
No, so
relevant.
let's do a part two to this, and I
100%.
feel like I find myself saying this to every speaker for some reason because I know everyone cares. But this is a very interesting one, and I
Yes.
also know, and I want to tell our viewers that we are also coming back with one on addictions because this has been on my mind for a very very long
Yes.
time,
And
and I
childhood
think
trauma is the primary cause of addictions in adulthood. The primary cause is childhood unresolved childhood trauma. Absolutely.
so. I have an
Absolutely.
entire discussion on this because I think it's the need of the hour with the amount of
100%.
drug in today's day and age. But
Absolutely. Could not agree more.
can childhood trauma lead to depression in adulthood? Can you have depression if you seemingly have everything else going for you?
So I need to
Uh,
break this down. Yeah. So depression is like any physical ailment you may have. So you can have diabetes. You can be a diabetic, right?
yeah.
And depression is like that. Depression. So there's two types of depression. There's depression in response to something that's currently going wrong in your life, and
Yeah.
there's chronic long-term depression that could be due to a chemical imbalance or some underlying issue that's not detected.
Okay.
Generally, children who have a lot of trauma in their childhood do develop dysthymia, which is like a mild, low grade depression. So it's not incapacitating, but it's a sort of sadness that's kind of there under the surface. But
Okay.
depression needs to be taken seriously and it needs to be treated. And
Right.
this is important because when a depressed person finally gets the courage to start talking and telling people that they're not okay, people
Yeah.
cannot diss it. You cannot
Yeah.
dismiss somebody's symptoms because you don't want to accept that they may not be well. So this
Right.
is so important. I cannot stress this enough that if somebody comes to you, if you're the
Yeah.
lucky person, the chosen person, and someone
Well said.
comes to you and says, listen, I'm not feeling good, I'm feeling low, or I don't have energy, or
Yeah.
you see them sinking, they're not the same person. You need to step up. Firstly, don't dismiss what they're telling you. Take what they're telling you seriously. Because when depression is caught early, it can be very well treated, it can be nipped in the bud, and the person can go on to have a very great life. And yes, depression can occur irrespective and regardless of age, caste, social status. You can be the most successful person in the world and have depression because if it's chemical, then you don't have control over it. You can be a superstar and have depression. You can be broke and have depression. It does not discriminate on those grounds. Anybody can be depressed, but it
Right.
needs to be taken. It's more than the depressed person. It's about the people around who
Right.
are, their family, their friends, their support system. when you see somebody is not okay consistently for a period of time, take it seriously. Ask them what's going on,
Right.
and allow them, give them the dignity of hearing them out.
Right.
It's
Right.
so important. You don't realize the impact that a depressed person, it takes a lot for a depressed person to come and ask for help. Nobody
Yeah.
wants to be seen as a depressed person. So when they are reaching out, make sure that you're present, you are offering the right kind of support and help. And the best way to do that is just accept that, yes, okay, if they're saying it, then something must be wrong. Let me see how I can help this person.
So I think let's also do, apart from addictions, let's also do an entirely other chat on depression. Because I think that is also the need of
Yes, absolutely. 100%. It's so important, right? So
chat
important.
to hear. There's another question that I think I missed. What's your opinion? I'm not sure what this question means. What's your opinion on family constellations to help with hold good trauma and inner child issues? Is this something relevant to you, Dee?
Inner child work is very important when you're resolving childhood trauma. Okay, because what happens is when you're traumatized as a child, in whatever way. Again, I'm not using this word loosely, but when you're traumatized as a child, your personality develops a bit differently. So you get fragmented. The part that has experienced the trauma sort of splits from the personality, and it
Okay.
fragments. So you're not a whole integrated person, depending on the severity and the level of trauma that you've experienced. So inner child work is just it's sort of a more real life way of dealing with your fragments, so to speak. So it's a way of kind of reparenting yourself and
Right.
working with those fragmented parts to integrate them. So you become a whole, complete person. So very,
Right.
very important, very good point. I'm glad they brought it up. I'm not very familiar with family constellations. I would say inner
Right.
child work is very, very relevant for childhood trauma. Absolutely,
Right. Right.
absolutely. Must be part of every therapeutic process.
Right. Dee, I know we're running out of time, and I also know that Thursday we do our spiritual Thursdays, which are more subjects connected to spirituality. But since we're having such an interesting discussion on this, and we have a lot of viewers are asking so many questions, if you feel you have the time, and if you can do,
Absolutely, absolutely. This is, I think, in so many ways, this is the need of the hour. This
yeah,
talk could not have probably come at a better time.
yeah. So we'll do a little more generic one on Thursday that maybe covers a little bit of questions that people still want to ask, depression or whatever.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Independence another time,
Done.
because that's
Absolutely.
a very important one. But thank you very much for taking time out and being on this
Thank
chat.
you.
It's
Thank you for having me. It's been wonderful to be here.
Yeah, and
Thank
to all our
you.
viewers, this chat is going to stay on the page, and we are continuing with this on Thursday with Diana at 4. What did she say?
Please.
So Thursday, 4 o'clock. We'll continue.
Many more topics coming up. Many
Yeah,
more topics coming up. I'm sure Achal and I will discuss and see what is most relevant,
yeah.
because there can be topics on specific issues. There can be more generic topics. This is the tip of the iceberg, really. This is where it all begins, I suppose, with childhood.
Stay
So
tuned,
thank you.
guys. Thank you very much. Thank you, Dee. Love you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you, my darling. Thank you for having me. It's been wonderful.
See
Thank you.
you.
See you guys. Thank you, everyone, for logging in. Thank you for your questions.